some books that I would say were hugely instrumental in helping me with the research. One is Capital Men, which I have right here, and it is a adult, it's not a children's book, but it's a nonfiction about the first Black members of Congress. And so this book was so helpful because it dedicated a chapter pretty much to each of the first Black members of Congress. And so I got to learn more about where they were from, what types of bills they were advocating for, what their experiences were like. A great resource is W.B. Du Bois' Black Reconstruction in America. And what's so interesting and important about this book is that one of the ways that the narrative of Reconstruction has been disregarded is because for a long time in the Jim Crow period after Reconstruction, it was really described as an abject failure. And that was the narrative that took hold, that was taught in schools, and so that made it really easy to dismiss this period because it was just like this was a horrible blip on in our country's history, and it was described as these Black people really were not ready for the responsibilities of citizenship, and so they were corrupt and they blew the whole thing. And it's a good thing that we're able to get it back on track through Jim Crow laws and through the subjugation of African Americans. But one of my favorite resources was the Library of Congress. I was able to pull up the transcripts from congressional hearings from the 1870s and read with my own eyes the speeches that these Black members of Congress were giving from the House floor. And my mind was just blown away at, how cogent and articulate and just like persuasive they were. And I was like, how could these people be a few years removed from slavery and be able to, just have such amazing like arguments and speeches and everything else. And so one of the things I wanted to do in Black Was the Ink is, as much as possible, I really tried to include the Congress people's own words, because I didn't want to substitute for their brilliance. Like what I was reading was brilliant. And so I wanted that to shine on its own. And I wanted people to be able to see on their own the mischaracterization that these people had been subjected to. And so the reason I brought that up is because W.B. Du Bois wrote this book in the 1930s, and he was one of the first to sort of reframe the narrative of the Reconstruction era and say, it really wasn't the failure everyone says it was, because what we really actually had was democracy for the first time. And that's important, and that's something we should acknowledge. And we should also look at the fruits of the democracy and the positive things that came from that, as I mentioned, public school and and other things. And another great resource is really everything that Eric Foner has written, because he is the foremost expert on Reconstruction today. And so he's got several books on Reconstruction. So the thing about these books, right? They're all amazing, wonderful, and awesome, but I wouldn't call them kid friendly. And so that's where I really saw a gap existing, is like, this is such important information that helps shape our understanding of who we are as a nation. And it's not as accessible to young people, to people that don't have PhDs or law degrees, or, just regular folk, And so I really wanted to write something that helped translate these important concepts and topics and everything in a way that if you have an eighth grade education, you could understand and you could learn from this.
This author interview was produced through a partnership of the Grateful American Foundation and WETA. For more author interviews, please visit adlit.org.